the ideas, the emotions, and attitudes. I was able to understand that now. He said, our book says we are now at step 3. I'm ready to take some action. And I can't never forget, what happens down there at that little church on Sunday morning about 11 o'clock. I know what goes on down there. They basically are asking people to come up there and do the third step prayer. And I couldn't wait till the next Sunday. I got there about 2 or 3 minutes before 11. I didn't want to get there too early, because I might hear something that helped me. But I got there about 2 or 3 minutes before 11, and sure enough, they asked people to come do the third step, basically, to do the third step prayer. And I went down there as humbly and sincerely and as honestly as I know how. And this is what I said. I said, God, I offer myself to you to build with me and do with me as you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. May I do your will always. Now, I don't know what happened that morning. I'm not smart enough to tell you. But I do know this. From that moment that I did this third step prayer until this day, my life hadn't been the same. It was like I'd been walking on the dark side of the street all that time, and all of a sudden I'm on the sunny side of the street. Later on, a day or two later, I went over to see my mom. And she said, Joe, Benny Joe, that's what she called me. She said, Benny Joe, you're different. What happened to you? And I said, I don't know what happened, Mom. I said, I told her what I did. She kind of smiled. Later on, if Phyllis was here telling this story, I went over to see her, try to make some amends. And the way she tells it, she said, I was like her Abby. She said it was something about my eyes. I was inexplicably different. And she said, what happened to you? And I don't know what to tell her. But I do know that my life is different. There's a story in that other big book. This fella was walking around and they asked him, said, what happened to you? He said, I don't know what happened. He said, I was blind and now I can see. I was drunk and now I'm sober. That's all I know is what happened to me. And my life hadn't been the same since that day till this day.
We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to Him. And I think utterly means all the way, the whole ball of wax. Now, I hope you don't make the mistake I did when I first took step 3. I got down on my knees and I used this prayer and I said, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, so on, so on, so on, and so forth. And I said, now this applies to my alcohol. Don't fool with my sex life. You don't need to worry about my money. I'll take care of that too.
God probably said, what an order. I can't go through with it.
Today I realize the fallacy in that whole statement was God don't want my alcohol. For as I know, God doesn't even drink, He wants me, and He wants all of me. And just think, if God could direct all my thinking, then it might become better in all areas. It might become better in my sex life. It might become better in my economic life. It might become better in my life in all areas. And certainly if my thinking should become better in all areas, my actions will become better, and then surely my life would become better too. He said we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it's better to meet God alone with one than with one who might misunderstand. It's highly recommended that we take step 3 in the company of another human being or other human beings. Now, way back in the beginning, when they were still meeting in Dr. Bob's house, still working the Oxford group program, when it was time for the newcomer to make their surrender, which is our step 3 today, some of the older members would take them upstairs into one of the bedrooms. They would all kneel, and the newcomer would make his surrender in the presence of the older members. And after he made his surrender, the older members would vote on how well he surrendered. And if it wasn't good enough, he'd have to go back and do it again later on, too. You know, we are tridimensional creatures. We are meant to live with God. We're meant to live with ourselves. And we're meant to live with other human beings. And it seems as though prayer has more depth and more meaning when we take this thing not only with God, but in the presence of other human beings also. The guys I sponsor, I insist that they take step 3 with me for 2 reasons. Number one, if they take it with me, I know they have taken it. That's the only way I know for sure. Now, I know people up here don't lie, but they do down where we're from once in a while. The real reason I want to take it with another human being is every time we do that, it has more meaning and more depth for me. And it seems to help me as much or more than it does the newcomer. I think it's a real good idea to take it with other people. Now, we're going to ask you a favor, and I think we'll have time to do this. I'm going to ask you as a favor just for me to reach out and hold hands with those around you. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to ask you to do so as a favor to me. And I'm going to read this step, and as I read it, I'm going to ask you to repeat it as I read it. God, I offer myself to Thee.
God, I offer myself to Thee.
To build with me and do with me as Thou wilt.
To build with me and do with me as I will.
Relieve me of the bondage of self.
Relieve me of the bondage of self.
That I may better do Thy will.
That I may better do Thy will.
Take away my difficulties.
Take away my difficulties.
That victory over them may bear witness.
That victory over them may bear witness.
To those I would help.
To those that I would help.
Of Thy power.
Of Thy power.
Thy love.
Thy love.
And Thy way of life.
And Thy way of life.
May I do Thy will always.
May I do Thy will always.
Amen.
Amen.
You'll never have to worry about whether you've taken step 3 or not. And you'll notice you took it in the company of other human beings, too.
And then our book says next, tells us what to do next. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision, which was step 3, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions. Remember back on page 45, it said the main object of this book, which enabled me to find a power greater than myself, which would solve my problem. And there are certain things within me that's blocking me off from the decision that I just made, wholeheartedly and all the way. And we have to get down to causes and conditions and see what those things that are within me that's blocking me off from the decision that I just made.
The first thing we like to look at is the time element between step 3 and step 4. We hear this question all the time. How long should you wait to do step 4 after you've done step 3? And we hear all kind of answers. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months. We heard a professional in the field counseling people to wait a minimum of 2 years. And our question to that counselor was, how many people have you killed with that statement? You see, we're trying to find a way to live where not only can we be sober, but we can have a little peace of mind and serenity and happiness so that we don't have to go back to drinking again. And every day we procrastinate and put off step 4 is another day we're restless and irritable and discontented. Another day we're filled with shame, fear, and guilt and remorse. Another day that we don't feel good. And our mind is going to feel bad just so long. And then it's going to start seeking relief. It starts thinking about the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. Next thing you know, we think we can drink and we end up drunk all over again. I don't know how long I could go without taking step 4. Frankly, I'm not too interested in finding out because I don't want to go back to drinking again. Now, knowing full well that we might get drunk if we don't take step 4, then why would we tend to continue to procrastinate on step 4? Probably 2 or 3 reasons. Number 1, some of the older members of AA tend to play king off of the mountain with this step. And they tell the newcomer how tough it is. By God, you just wait till you get to step 4. Rah, 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 rah. And we just literally scare them to death. Well, let us be the first to say today, there's not a thing in the world to be afraid of in step 4. If we do it the way the big book says to do it, we are not going to make a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items. We're going to look in our minds and we're going to try to find those things that block us off from carrying out the decision that we just made in step 3. If we can find those things and see the truth behind them, we're going to see how to get rid of them. And the greatest thing of all, we're going to see not only how to get rid of them, but how to keep them from coming back in the future. And that way we can live and be peaceful and happy and free. And I think one of the greatest problems we've had with step 4 is not understanding how Bill writes. We really couldn't understand the instructions. They're here on page 64, but they are so short and so sweet and so simple that we alcoholics with our keen intellectual alcoholic minds looking for something more complicated have just complicated the hell out of this mess. And we really couldn't see what he wanted us to do. So what we're going to do today, let's just kind of relax and take it easy, and we'll look at a few words, and let's remember now that Bill likes to use something we already know about to teach us something new. He's going to talk to us here about a business inventory, assuming that we know something about a business inventory. And he's going to use that to teach us how to take our own inventory. The other thing we must always realize is Bill repeated himself quite often, but he always found a different word that means the same thing, rather than use the same words over and over and over. And I think his first comparison that he has between the inventory is this. He said, therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4, and immediately he jumps to business. He says a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. And I think we could probably all see that. You know, if you had a business selling ladies' purses, men's watches, bicycles, whatever it is, if you didn't go in there and inventory once in a while, you wouldn't have any idea how you stand in business. You wouldn't know what's been stolen that you didn't get paid for. You wouldn't know what's been sold, and you need to order new stock to replace that's been sold. You wouldn't know what's become out of style and nobody wants to buy it. You need to put it on sale and get it out of your store. It's taking up valuable shelf space, valuable floor space, and you're probably paying interest on borrowed money that you used to buy it in the first place. You wouldn't know what's become damaged and unsaleable, and nobody wants to buy that, and it's taking up your floor space and shelf space. A business that takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. And I think his first comparison is this. We have a personal business. And our personal business is the business of finding a way to live where we can have a little peace of mind, serenity, and happiness. And if we don't inventory in our personal business, we're probably going to go broke too. And going broke for us is simply to go back to drinking. So it makes no difference whether it's a business inventory or personal inventory. Without it, we're probably going to go back to drinking. Now, Joe's putting a picture up here on the screen. And we're going to look at some words that Bill used about the business inventory and about our personal inventory, and we're going to compare those words. On the left-hand side of the sheet, we have business, and on the right-hand side of the sheet, we have personal. And the first thing we're going to do is cover up the personal side, and we're going to look at these words and terms that he used under the business inventory. He says, taking a commercial inventory. Now, Dad burned him, he could have said business again, see? But he don't like to use the same word twice, so he'll call it commercial this time, meaning the same thing. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding, and we're putting fact-finding under business. And a fact-facing process, and we're putting fact-facing under business. It is an effort to discover the truth, and we're putting truth under business, about the stock in trade, and we're putting stock in trade under business. Now, the stock in trade is what we've got in there to sell. The ladies' purses, the men's watches, the bicycles, or whatever. Now, one object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods. So we're looking for the damaged and unsaleable goods. The good items do not cause us to go broke. They keep selling day after day after day. We make money out of them. The ones that's going to cause us to go broke are the damaged and unsaleable goods. And to get rid of them promptly and without regret. So we're putting get rid of them promptly and without regret. In other words, we're looking for the stock in trade that's damaged. And when we find it, we're going to try to get rid of it promptly and without regret, so that we can open up spaces and put good items back into our store. Now, is there anybody who would have any problem with the statement that he just made? We're going to try to find the facts. We're going to try to face those facts. We're going to try to look at them truthfully. And we're looking at the stock in trade that is damaged and unsaleable. When we find it, we're going to get rid of it promptly and without regret. And he said if the owner is the business to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. He's going to have to be honest. Now, sometimes he might say, well, the reason these ladies aren't buying these purses is they just don't really understand what they need. And rather than admit that he made a mistake in buying them in the first place, he'll keep them in there much longer than he should, and it costs him money every time he does so. So he's going to have to be absolutely honest with himself. Anybody got any quarrel with that? Okay, now look at him. He said we did exactly the same thing with our lives. In other words, he wants us to do with our lives what he just told us to do in the business inventory. We took stock honestly. Now, he wrote a little step for us in order to take this stock honestly. And let's look at those words and compare them to the words that he used for the business inventory. He said we made a searching, and we're putting it straight across from fact-finding. They mean the same thing. To find the facts, to search out the facts. We made a searching and fearless. We're putting fearless straight across from fact-facing. They mean the same thing. To face those facts as they really are, to fearlessly look at them. We made a searching and fearless moral, and there's where we got in trouble. We said, oh crap, there it is. There's that list of dirty, filthy, nasty items. And we don't want to look at them, we sure as hell don't want to show them to somebody else. Now, I'm not sure what all Bill Wilson knew. But I know this guy understood the English language. And I really think if he had wanted you and I to make a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items, I think he would have said we made a searching and fearless amoral or immoral inventory. And he didn't say that, he said moral. And bugged us and bugged us and bugged us. Finally, we went back to the dictionary. And moral is defined in the dictionary as nothing more than truth. Things as they really are. The right and wrong of any given situation. Moral and truth means exactly the same thing. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of what? Of ourselves. We're the only stock in trade that we have in this business of staying sober. Nobody else can make us sober. Nobody else can make us drink. Oh, I'll admit they could make us thirsty as hell once in a while, but they can't make us drink. We decide whether we drink or not. Now, what part of us decides whether we drink or not? Is it our body or is it our mind? The real problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind telling us we can drink. So I'm going to look into myself, and I'm going to look into my mind, and I'm going to try to find those flawed thinking processes, the damaged and unsaleable goods, and when I find them, I'm going to try to get rid of them promptly and without regret. Now, every selfish, self-centered human being has three flawed thinking processes always present. The three common manifestations of self, we've already looked at them when we talked about step 3. And that is resentment, and that is fears, and that's the guilt and remorse associated with the people I've hurt in the past. Those three things are in my mind, and they very effectively block God out. And if I want God to enter my mind, I'm going to have to do something about their removal. You see, God told the human race a long time ago, when He put us out of the garden, He said, if you're going to run on self-will, then I can't help you anymore. He said, I take care of and supply for those that follow my will. And those that are going to operate on self-will, they're going to have to leave this garden, and they're going to be responsible for themselves. And as they started out the gate, I can almost see God standing there with tears in His eyes. And He said, wait, hold on just a minute. He said, I tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to make a deal with you. He said, I love you enough that I'll let you stay out there operating on self-will until you destroy yourself. He said, I'll never take it back from you. But He said, if you want to give it back to me freely, and you want to start following my will, then I will take your self-will back, and I will provide for you again. God can't reach in my mind and take out those things that block Him out until I'm willing to do my part. And my part is to see what they are and to look at them honestly and do something about getting rid of them. And then and only then can God begin to direct my thinking.
It wasn't the apple in the tree that caused all the problems. It was the pear on the ground.
Yeah, and after it was over, the snake didn't have a leg left to stand on either. Now listen to him. He said we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly, truthfully, morally. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways and what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we've been not only mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When a spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. And I think before we can put resentments on paper, we should look at what a resentment really is. A lot of people are confused by that. But the word resentment itself comes from two old words. The first part of that word, R-E, comes from an old word that means to do over or to do again. The word sentiment comes from an old word called sentire, which means to feel. So the word resentment means to Re-feel is what it actually means. Now let's say we're going through life and we run into somebody that's sick in self and they do something to us to threaten one of our basic instincts of life. Maybe they put me down in the eyes of other people. Maybe they threaten my personal relationship. Maybe they do something that hurts my self-esteem. Maybe they do something that hurts my security. They rip me off and take my money. Or maybe they do something that threatens my sex life. And when they do those things to me, that hurts. Now, that's not a resentment. That's a wrong on their part for doing so. It doesn't become a resentment until I go off in the other room, or I got home at night and sit down in my easy chair, and I replay that thing in my mind, and I re-feel the pain the second time. Now, the stupidity in it is that they did it to me the first time, but I'm sitting there doing it to myself the second time. They're not even around me now. And I sit there and I replay it again, and I hurt myself the third time. Now, and I found also that I'm not always too honest with myself when I do this. Because as I play that over in my head and feel that pain the second time, I find that I tend to distort the picture just a little bit every time I play it over. I tend to make what they did just a little bit worse. I tend to make what I did just a little bit less. And let me play it over in my mind long enough, then I'm able to say, well, I just stand there doing nothing, and they come along and did it to me, and it's all their damn fault. You know, we love to watch football in Oklahoma, and you guys do up here too, I know you do. And you watch a good football game, and once in a while you'll see the quarterback throw a pass out there, and the guy that is supposed to catch that pass, he has to jump way up off the ground to get it. A lot of times they do that on purpose. And while the receiver's up in the air, just as the ball touches his hands, the opposing team have learned that's the time to hit him. He's absolutely, completely defensive. He's all stretched up in the air. His feet's 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and they hit him and they just knock the hell out of him. And they turn him upside down, and he falls, and he lands on his head, and his head goes one way, his body goes another way, an arm stretches out, and the legs twisted behind his back, and he's laying there on the ground, and he is hurt, and you can see that he's hurt. Now, a football game, though, is just like the game of life. You're not going to stop it. One or two things are going to happen. That guy's laying on the ground hurt, and they're going to run out there and check him out. And if he hadn't hurt too bad, they'll pump a little air to him and get him up, and they'll start playing again. If he's hurt too bad, they'll drag him off to the side and put somebody in his place, and the game starts again. The game is going to go on. Now, the announcer up in the booth, though, he's got a resentment machine up there. Because after a while, he says, let's look at that again. And this time, it is slow motion, living color, and you can really see the expression of pain on that guy's face, and it looks twice as bad this time as it did the first time. And after a while, the announcer says, let's look at that again. Now, the game's been going on for 15 minutes, and the announcer's sitting there bouncing that guy up and down, up and down, up and down. We alcoholics have in our mind, I guess other people do too, but especially we alcoholics have in our mind a little resentment replay machine. And we get up in the morning, and we tune it up in living color. We clean the lens on it. We don't want to miss anything. We shine it on the world all day long. We record everything that they do to us that's bad. We don't record nothing good. We record everything they do to us that's bad. We go home at night, sit down in our easy chair, play it over in our head, make ourselves sick, and blame it on others. But there's some days we have a bad time. There's some days that we've got her tuned up in living color. We've got the lens clean. We're shining it on the world, and they won't do anything bad to us.
That's a bad day for an alcoholic.
My God, that's a bad day for an alcoholic. We got nothing to record. You know what we do then? By God, we record what they're thinking. That's what we do. Is there any way that God can enter a mind filled with that kind of crap? Absolutely not. You know, there's one bad thing about a resentment. You keep throwing it out there long enough, and after a while it turns around and it comes right back at you. And it comes right back at you as self-resentment. And we begin to resent ourselves for being in a position to have those things happen to us. And we alcoholics can't stand self-resentment. After a while, self-resentment turns to self-pity. And my God, we love self-pity. We love to get it up in the morning and put that self-pity on as a cloak of dignity, and we go out the door and we say, here I come, mean old world. I know you're out there, you're just waiting to get me. You know, after all, if everybody's waiting to get you, then you must be pretty important. It's a sick, sick way to build your ego. And my God, we just love it. You try to feel sorry for an alcoholic, and they'll tell you in a hurry, by God, you don't feel sorry for me. That's my business to feel sorry for me. There's no way that God can enter a mind filled with that kind of crap. There's no way that God can direct the thinking, because whatever we resent, that is controlling our thinking for us. And if that controls our thinking, then God can't. And it's just that simple. Now, I like to look at my head up here as a little bitty store. Not very much. A little Quick Trip, a little 7-Eleven, a little Come and Get It, or a little Get and Go, or whatever you want to call them. Not a hell of a lot up there. But in this side of my store, I've got some display cases that are filled with resentments. Damn him and damn her, and by God, they're not going to treat me that way, and I'll show them, and blah-de-blah, blah, 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 blah. God is very effectively blocked out of there. He cannot fill those display cases until those resentments are gone. Over here at this side of my store, I've got a little file cabinet, and it's filled with fear. Oh, my God, what's she going to do when she finds out about this one? Oh, my God, what's the banker going to say when that check gets there? He's already told me he'll file on me the next time. Oh, my God, what's the boss going to do when he finds? Oh, my God, is that my car sitting out in the front end tore up? Oh, my God, and on and on and on and on. God can't get in there. That file cabinet's already filled with fear. Back here in the back of my head, I've got a storeroom, and it's filled with guilt and remorse associated with the people I've heard in the past. It just eats us up, and God can't enter that room. So I'm going to have to empty this crap out, and we do it first with resentments. Let's look at just a few little simple ideas on resentments. Now, I think that the greatest problem we've had with it in the past is page 65, which is the example, is already filled out. And we didn't know the directions that Bill used to tell us how to fill that out. So what we've done, we've given you a sheet called the Review of Resentments. And on that sheet you have 5 columns. And we will ask you to take your last 2 columns and fold them under. And when you do that, you'll have 3 blank columns. Column 1, I'm resentful at. Column 2, the cause. Column 3, affects my. You know, we want to stress here now that we're not trying to bring another inventory into AA. All this is page 65 in the blank form. Now let's see how Bill went about seeing the truth about these resentments, Joe.
See, we're taught to read from left to right. And if you were like me and you're going to do an inventory from the big book where you look on page 65, you don't know how he filled it out, but you're going to try to figure it out. I'm pretty good at figuring stuff out. He said, I'm resentful at. He writes down Mr. Brown. You change your mind, you go to the cause. Why is he mad at Mr. Brown? Then what part of self was affected? And I don't really know and understand self too well, so that doesn't really help me a lot. Change my mind, go back to Mrs. Jones. Change my mind again, put down the cause. Change my mind to what part of self is affected. And if you've got a little mind like mine, first thing you know, it says tilt. And I said, oh, heck. There are words to that effect. Oh, heck. They want all my life story anyhow. They don't want this page 65. And I set out to write all my life story. Write down all the dirty, filthy, rotten things that I ever done, saw, felt, or whatever. And you know what? Those things never really helped me writing all that down. You know why? Because I already knew it. I couldn't have wrote it down if I didn't already know it. So I already knew that stuff. It wouldn't help me at all. But it effectively covered up about the 5% of the stuff that would have helped me. And I couldn't even see because I couldn't see past that. So if we look at this inventory filled out, we'll look at the instructions in the book. It'll tell us how to fill it out when we believe, from top to bottom, one column at a time, what our minds are on one thing and one thing only, resentful. He says, well, in dealing with resentment, we set them on paper. Okay, we got the paper. We listed people, institutional principles with whom we were angry, period.
Period.
Stop right there. And we'll write down the people or institutional principles whom we're angry, leaving a little space just like they did there on the example on page 65, because that helps us over in the next column, leaving a little space between that. Going one column at a time, top to bottom, what our minds are on one thing and one thing only.
People, that's self-explanatory. Institutions are those things such as the police department, the Internal Revenue Service, the post office, the church, all those institutions that we get upset with. Principles are those old guiding principle laws that we've heard all of our life that tend to interfere with our style of living. You know, the Ten Commandments were a set of principles. And when I was out there drinking and doing my thing, I don't want to hear nothing about the Ten Commandments. I'm breaking practically all of them except one, and maybe breaking it too during the blackout as far as I know.
There's an Olds Intrigue, Silver, Minnesota license plate BBV 473. It's in the fire lane. It has to be moved immediately, or they will remove it.
Read it again to make sure.
It's a purple Olds.
Purple O's.
Minnesota license plates BBV 473.
Either of those names apply?
Do what?
Do either of those names apply to that car?
I don't know.
Kent Silver or?
I don't believe so. Nobody in here to park in a fire lane, would they? Oh, the owners of the car is Ken Silver or Teresa Ragusky.
Okay.
They would do that.
Hopefully it's not one of us. I'd hate to see one of us have a car towed off. Does happen, though, doesn't it? Another old principle I always hated said, what goes up must come down. I never cared for that one. And there's one that said, what you give out's what you get back. And another one said, there are no free rides. You'll pay for what you receive. And there's one that my dad used to use on me. He said, son, if you lay down with dogs, you'll get fleas on you every time. You know, those things used to just infuriate the hell out of me. Now, really filling out this column is pretty simple. You know, you don't have to be highly educated to do this. If you can't write, well, you just simply feed the names to somebody else and have them write them down for you. I've never known an alcoholic yet that didn't know just exactly and who, what by God we're mad at. We sit around hour after hour talking about it in bars. All we have to do is take it out of our head, put it down on a sheet of paper. And I hope, if you haven't done this before, I hope the same thing will happen to you that happened to me. They come to me and said, make a list of your resentments, and I said, I don't have any. And they said, oh, surely you do. I said, maybe you don't understand what a resentment is. And they explained it as to refill those old hurts and those old pains. And I said, well, yeah, I've got a couple of those. And they said, okay, put it down on paper. So I got a piece of paper and started listing names, leaving a little space, as Bill has done it here in the book. And on that sheet of paper, the next thing you know, I had written down about 8 names. And I got another sheet of paper, and I wrote down 8 more names. And I got another sheet of paper, and I wrote down 8 more names. And I got up to about 152. I said, man, you're madder than hell at everybody. I did not know that. You can only see one resentment at a time in your head. And I don't think any of us are ever going to realize how many resentments we really do have and how much they control and dominate our thinking until we get them all down on a sheet of paper and see them in their entirety for the first time. Now, we've made a decision to let God direct our thinking. And if we've got that many resentments, then they direct our thinking and God can't, and it's just that simple. I learned something very valuable just by filling out the first column. Now let's look at the second instruction.
So you don't get mad at just one person or one thing. When the mind becomes resentful, we're resentful everywhere, at everything, and we don't know that. Next instruction. We ask ourselves why we were angry, period. We stop right there and go to the middle column, the cause. And you notice that Bill only used 4 or 5 words to describe the cause. We're not going to fill out a long essay on what the cause is. We're simply going to write down 4 or 5 words describing the cause. Simplicity is the key here in the second column. Very, very simple. For instance, he's mad at Mr. Brown. Why? Well, his attention to my wife. Told my wife of my mistress. Brown may get my job at the office. I don't even know Mr. Brown, but I'm getting mad at him myself. He's mad at Miss Jones. Why? Well, she's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband for drinking. He's my friend, and she's a gossip. Put my best drinking buddy in the nut house is what she did. My employer, well, he's unreasonable, unjust, and overbearing.
He probably said, say, Bill, where were you all day Monday anyhow?
Yeah. He threatens to fire me for my drinking and padding my expense account.
That's reasonable as hell, isn't it?
Very narrow-minded guy. He's very upset at his wife. Why? Well, she misunderstands and nags, and she likes old Brown, and she wants the house put in her name. Boy, you tie all that together, it's time to get upset, isn't it? Simplicity is the key. Just 4 or 5 words describe the cause.
There might just be one cause. There might be multiple causes. As I filled out the second column, I learned something very, very valuable. I began to realize it's really not the people and the institutions that I'm mad at. It's what they've done to me that's got me upset. See, I could take Mr. Brown out of here and put Mr. Green in. I'll be just as mad at Green if he does the same thing. I could take Mrs. Jones out of here and put Mrs. Smith in. I'll be just as mad at Smith as I am at Jones. It's not the people, the institutions that I'm upset about. It's what they've done to me that's got me upset. And the reason that's so valuable is later on in my program, I'm going to be asking people to forgive me for what I've done to them. By the same token, I'm going to have to forgive people for what they've done to me. And part of the forgiving process can start right here in the second column when I begin to realize it's not them that I'm upset with, it's what they've done to me that's got me upset. That starts removing names, get them out of the way where I don't even have to consider the names anymore. Very valuable information. Let's look at the third instruction.
In most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal sex relations with that being interfered with? We were usually as definite as this example. And that's why we looked at that 3 basic instincts of life to get a working knowledge of these words so that we could fill out the third column.
I can't get upset with you unless you've done something to threaten one of my basic instincts of life. If you threaten my social instinct in any way, you're going to upset me. If you threaten my self-esteem, If you threaten my personal relationships, you're going to upset me. If you threaten my security, you're going to upset me. If you threaten my sex life, you're going to upset me. Anytime I'm upset with another person or an institution, there's been some threat to my basic instincts of life. So I write down by the side of each cause which basic instinct has been threatened. In Bill's example, he's mad at Mr. Brown because his attention to my wife. Well, what part of self is threatened here? Well, first is the sex relations. If his wife gets to fooling around with old Brown and finds out that he's better than Bill is, well, she might cut him off at home. It's also a threat to his self-esteem. What are people going to think about me if my wife gets to fooling around with Brown? And it becomes common knowledge. He's also mad at Brown because he told my wife of my mistress. Now, boy, that's a threat to sex relations. Because when the wife found out about the mistress, she cut him off at home. Then she went over and beat the hell out of the mistress, and the mistress has cut him off over there too. No sex relations at all. It's a threat to his self-esteem. Here I am living in a neighborhood, going to work every day, paying my taxes like a citizen should, providing for my wife and children, taking the Boy Scouts out on Saturday afternoon, teaching Sunday school on Sunday morning, and all of a sudden, this information about me and my wife and Brown and my mistress has now become neighborhood gossip. Oh my God, what are they going to think about me now? If you don't think that's a threat to self-esteem, you ask Jimmy Swaggart. You ask that fellow that used to be up in the White House, Bill C. It'll tell you what that'll do to your self-esteem in a hurry. He's also mad at Brown because Brown may get my job at the office. Now, that's a threat to his security. If he loses his job, he has no income. By the same token, it's a threat to his self-esteem. Because after all, what are people going to think about me if Brown undercuts me and takes my job away from me? As I filled out the third column, I think I begin to realize one of the most valuable things I've ever learned about me. As I filled out the third column, I begin to see where anger really does come from. I've always had a problem with anger. And I've always acted and reacted with anger, and I would say and do something that would hurt somebody else, and I'd be ashamed of that, and I'd say, I'll not do that again. But I turn right around and get angry and do the same thing over and over and over and over. You can't do anything about a problem till you understand the problem. And I thought anger was just one of those feelings that flitted into your mind. You could do nothing about it. But today I realize anger comes from a threat to one of my basic instincts of life. And it's how I choose to react to that threat which is going to determine whether I'm angry or not. If my relationship with God is right, and if my instincts are under control, you can do about anything you want to do to me, and you're not going to make me angry. But if my instincts are not under control, my relationship with God is right, about anything you do to me is going to cause me to be angry. Let me give you a good example. This lady I'm married to, Barbara, that's got so many years in Al-Anon, she's fine Al-Anon, got a great program. But Al-Anons get sick in self once in a while too. Now they don't like to admit it, but they do. It's just like we alcoholics do. And once in a great while, being sick in self, Barbara will do something to me or say something that threatens one of my basic instincts of life. And if my relationship with God is right, my instincts are under control, I find I'm able to say, well, the poor old thing. They're just like we are. They're sick too, and they can't help it any more than we can. And it'll just slide off of my back. And I go through the rest of the days and everything's just fine. 30 days later, though, the same lady does the same thing. And this time my instincts are not under control. My relationship with God's not right. And I react and I romp and I stomp and I raise hell with Barbara and everybody around me all day long. Same lady did the same thing. But I choose to react to it in an entirely different manner based upon whether my instincts are under control and my relationship with God. Oh, I'm glad I've learned that. Because you see, I can't do anything about Barbara. And I can't do anything about any other human being on earth does. But I can do something about my reaction to it with God's help. And I'm in much less chance of drinking now than I was before I started this inventory process. You see, I've learned 3 things here. Column 1, I've learned how resentful I really am, how much that blocks me from God. Column 2, I've learned it's not them I resent, it's what they've done to me. Column 3, I've learned it's not even what they've done to me. It's how I have chosen to react to that thing, which determines whether I'm going to be angry or not. One other thing we'll learn in column 3, we'll begin to see the part of self, which is really giving us a hard time. If we find ourselves checking self-esteem, then the social instinct is giving us a hard time. If we find ourselves continually checking security, maybe our major problem is insecurity, or it may be under sex. It's going to be a combination of all 3. But one part of self is going to stand out and show us the part of self that we really having a problem with. Joe?
We're going to do Charlie's inventory.
We're going to put 2 or 3 examples up here just to show you how simple it really is. I'm not about to list 152, but we'll list a couple of mine. The first name on my sheet was this lady named Barbara. About 35 or 36 years ago, I hated this woman with a purple passion. If there'd have been any way that I could have gotten rid of her without having to go to the penitentiary over it, I sure as hell would have done it. I used to lay awake at night and fantasize. Now, tomorrow morning on her way to work, and I always wanted her working. I believed in her being self-supporting through her own contributions. I'd think on her way to work now, she's going to get run over by a big semi-truck. And it's not going to be just any trucking company. It's going to be a very affluent trucking company. And they're going to run over her and they're going to kill her, and then I'm going to sue them, and I'm going to get rid of her, and I'm going to get $2 or $3 million out of this deal. See? Believe me, you Al-Anons are not the only ones that fantasize. We alcoholics do it too. Second name on my resentment sheet was the Internal Revenue Service. Now, if you want to see somebody become unglued and start frothing at the mouth, you just mention the Internal Revenue Service in my presence, and I just blew up and went completely crazy. God, I hated those people. Joe, who was the first one on your inventory sheet? A lady named Rose. Now, Joe didn't tell you, but he's been married and divorced to 2 women 7 times. Which one of these women was that, Joe? Number 1. Okay, number 1. Now that's how simple the first column is. You just make the list of names. Now we go to column 2. Why am I so upset with Barbara? Well, this woman had the audacity to file for divorce 3 times the last year before she went to Al-Anon. Hell, she's spending more money on lawyers, and I'm spending on booze and everything with it. And I really had it in for her for doing this. Why am I so upset with the Internal Revenue Service? Well, they're trying to put me in jail. That's why I'm so upset with them. And I really had it in for those people for doing that. Joe, how come you so upset with Rose?
She had an affair with another man.
Uh-huh.
For all I've done to her. I mean, after all I've done
That's how simple column 2 is. See? Now we go to column 3. Which part of self is affected? Barbara filing for divorce 3 times. Is that a threat to my self-esteem? Oh, yeah, what are people going to think about me now? This woman's filed for divorce 3 times, and hell, I'm still living with her in the same house. Is it a threat to my personal relationships? Sure, she's going to take the kids, and they're going to leave. Is it a threat to my security? Oh, yeah, by the time she and those lawyers get through, they'll have it all, what little bit I got left. Is it a threat to my sex life? Well, yeah, she probably not going to let me have any after we get a divorce. It was hard enough talking her into it before we got married. Now I know she won't. Internal Revenue Service putting me in jail, trying to put me in jail. Is that a threat to my self-esteem? Sure, what are people going to think about me if I end up in jail? Threat to my personal relationships? Sure, I can't have any relationship with my wife and children and me in the jailhouse. Threat to my security? Oh, yeah, by the time they get through and levy their fines, and they'll have it all, what little bit's left. Is there a threat to my sex life? The kind I'd like to have, yeah, there may be some in there I don't want, see. Old Rose having an affair with another man. Is that a threat to Joe's self-esteem? Why, sure it is. You know, he's not even man enough to keep his own wife at home. She's out there fooling around. I never look to see what he's done. I just go on about my business. Is it a threat to his personal relationships? Certainly. Is it a threat to his security? Oh, yeah, that woman been supporting him for the last 10 years. He's going to have to go get a job now. Is it a threat to his sex life? Sure it is. Just wipes us out right across the board. Now, that's how simple this thing is. It's not that difficult to do. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time to do that either, see? Hell, you can sit down in a couple of hours. You can do this resentment part of this thing. It's just not that hard to do. Okay, let's go back now to the book again. Joe, where are you? You still over there? Is he still keeping me on that resentment sheet, or?
To let you off.
Okay, let's go to the bottom of page 65 now, and let's see what we're going to do with this information we've put down.
See, we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was this world and its people were often quite wrong. Well, I knew that all along. To conclude that others was wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. Now, it's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours which might have been worthwhile.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but I know about me. And when I've got a good resentment churning around in my head, I'm pretty well paralyzed from doing anything worthwhile. All I want to do is just sit there and play that thing over and over and over and over and over. And one of my favorite things that I used to love to do when I was drinking, I'd get up early in the morning, I'd have a cup of coffee and a drink of whiskey, and I would turn on my resentment replay machine. And I'd replay what she did to me yesterday, and what he did to me last week, and what that damn neighbor said to me 6 months ago, and what that damn boss did to me a year ago, and what that damn policeman did to me 5 years ago, and what this guy did and what that guy did and what that guy did. And it took me just about an hour to run through that tape. And I loved every moment of it. And when that tape would run out, I'd have another drink of whiskey and another cup of coffee, and I would turn on my Get Even machine. Now, by God, the next time she does that, I'm going to do this and she'll do that, and soccer women, they're not going to treat me that way. And it took me just about an hour to run through that Get Even tape, and I loved every moment of it. When I came to AA, I found out I was doing the same thing. I just wasn't having a drink of whiskey. I was having a cup of coffee. I turned on the resentment replay machine, run it for an hour. Another cup of coffee, turn on the Get Even machine, run it for an hour. And I have spent literally thousands and thousands and thousands of hours in resentments. And as I look at them now, I can't see that they ever did me any good whatsoever. They never made me any money. They never made me feel better. They only made me sicker and sicker and sicker. They never straightened up a relationship with another human being. They only made it worse and worse and worse. And I can't see where there was any benefit in that at all. Now, today I'm convinced as human beings we've only got so much time allotted to live here on earth. And mine's beginning to get pretty short. I don't have a hell of a lot of it left. And I'm going to tell you something. This is the first time in my life that I've been sober and really peaceful and happy and free. My God, I love to feel the way that I feel today. I didn't know you could feel this way. And what little time I got left, I want to enjoy every moment of it. I simply refuse to waste any more time in resentments, period, because I don't have to do that anymore. That's one of the worst things about a resentment, an absolute waste of time. But that's not the worst thing. Here's the worst thing about a resentment.
But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of a resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns when we drink again, and with us to drink is to die.
There's the worst thing about a resentment. When we got a good resentment churning around, we're very effectively blocked off from God. The resentment is controlling the way we think. And blocked off from God, we don't feel good. And the mind's going to feel bad just so long. It's going to start seeking relief. And we'll never forget the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a couple of drinks. Next thing you know, we get to thinking about taking a drink. And after a while, we've convinced ourselves that it's okay. And we take the drink and we trigger the allergy, and we end up drunk all over again. I've seen more people get drunk in AA over resentments than I have over anything else. You know, they really do kill us. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. We turn back to the list. See, that's why you got to have a written inventory. If you didn't have a written inventory, you would already have lost it. But now we go back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Always before, I looked at it to see what those suckers had done to me. Today, I would look at it to see what that resentment is doing to me. And if it's going to get me drunk, then I'm looking at it from an entirely different angle. We begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. And I stopped and I said, Charlie, how dumb can you be? All my life I've been proud of the fact that I stand on my own 2 feet. Nobody tells me what to do. I don't need your advice, thank you. And I suddenly realized that other people have controlled and dominated my thinking through my resentments toward them as far back as I can remember. I always thought I had it. Hell, I never had it. All I've ever done is react to those people, and through my resentments toward them, they controlled how I thought, they controlled how I acted, they controlled my life for me. And when I saw that, those resentments that used to look so good began to look, by God, pretty dumb. You know, we alcoholics fancy ourselves as reasonably intelligent people. We don't like to look dumb. And we see what we've let other people do to us through our resentments toward them. That looks so dumb, we become ashamed of it. And about 90% of those resentments will automatically start disappearing. Oh, they look good in your head, but they look crazy as hell on paper when you really see the truth behind them. And then I said to myself, Charlie, you really are stupid. Because some of these people have been dead and buried in a graveyard for years. They've been reaching out from the grave, and they've had me but a yang-yang as far back as I can remember. And when I saw that, I said, to hell with them. I'm not going to let those people live in my head rent-free any longer. I've made a decision to let God direct my thinking. And if they direct it, alive or dead, God can't. And it's just that simple. And most of my resentments begin to disappear. Now, there probably will be 1, 2, 3, or 4, though, that's embedded so deeply for so long, we're probably going to have a little extra help to get rid of them. And every action step that we have recognizes that self cannot overcome self. That we're always going to have God's help. And now then, my book is getting ready to tell me what to do about those that are so deeply embedded. He said, how could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol.
Can't heal a sick mind with a sick mind. Can't be done. Well, this was our course. We realized that people who'd wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. And here's the first prayer in step 4 prayer. We talk a lot about the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer, but there's prayer in every one of these steps. There's also prayer in the 4th step. And here's the prayer. We ask God to help us to show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God save me from being angry. Thy will be done. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. See, I'm like Charlie. I've had many, many resentments. Lay awake nights and my mind would race uncontrollably, day after day after year after year after year. And I've squandered an awful lot of time in resentments. I always want to find a way to get even with those people. Always did. Well, I found a way to get even with them. And the way you get even with them is you pray for them. And when you pray for them, then you're even. You see? And I remember I had been sober 3 or 4 months, and I went to a little conference in Apache, Oklahoma. And I met a lady there. Her name was Alabama Carruthers. She's dead now. Alabama was about 62 or 3 or 4 years old at the time. And she was excited about AA and excited about life, and she couldn't wait to see what was going to happen next. She was so excited. I'd hate to have been around her when she was 25. Boy, she had lots of energy. I just loved Alabama immediately when I first met her. And then after the meeting was over, we were sitting in the lobby of this hotel, and my little friend George was laying over in her lap, and she and I began to talk, and it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I said, Alabama, you said 2 things tonight that really struck me like a thunderbolt. One of them said, you said that you had a soul sickness. And I remember sitting on that bar stool my last night of drinking, and I had a sick feeling in my stomach. Not a throwing up type sick, just a sick feeling. And that was a soul sickness. She finally said a word that I could identify with the feeling. It was a soul sickness. And I said, you also said, Alabama, that you had a peace of mind tonight. And I said, I've never had peace of mind. Can't ever remember having any peace of mind. How did you get peace of mind? And she said, well, Joe, tell me what's going on in your mind. Now, I've never told anybody up to this moment this. And I began to tell her. When I used to drink and go places, and I didn't come back right away. I was one of those people. And one night, I was drinking, and I got to thinking. Now, you all know either drink or think, but don't get the two of them mixed up. I was sitting in the Zebra Lounge, lovely place. And I was drinking, and I got to thinking, Well, old Rose there hadn't seen me in about 3 months, and I bet she'd be lonely. And wouldn't you be if you hadn't seen me in about 3 months? I said, I think I'll go over there and visit. Does anybody know what I mean by visit? Okay, make sure you understand. So I went over there to go to visit, and I knocked on the door, and she kind of peeked out. Well, what happened? I just broke right in there, and there sat a big old boy in my recliner, watching my TV in my house with my wife, and I'm making payments on all that. Well, what are you going to do? I did. I jumped on that old boy. He liked to beat me to death in my own living room floor. Threw me out in the yard and told me not to ever come back. Boy, you think I didn't live on that for a long time. Ooh. I took all of that anger and hurt with me into my next marriage, and we had nothing but hell, which I'll talk about that maybe tomorrow. But anyhow, she said, well, Joe, you're just full of resentments. And I said, well, what is a resentment? She said, all these old angers and old hurts that you have, and you tend to use your anger on those people. You're using it on yourself. You're making yourself sick and blaming it on them. And she had to explain that to me 2 or 3 different times before I could finally get it. And finally I said, well, Alabama, is there any solution for that? She said, yeah, yours is very deep-seated, very, very deep-seated. You'll have to have a special kind of solution. And she looked in her purse. She had this great big purse, and she digging, you know, how they are, digging down in there, and she finally found one of these big books down there. And she pulled it out, and she said, Joe, if you'll go to page 551 and read and do what it says, she said it helped her to get over her resentments. Maybe it would help me. So let's go to page 551 briefly. And the book says, on the 3rd paragraph, it says, I've had many spiritual experiences since I've been in the program. Many that I didn't recognize right away, for I'm slow to learn and they take many guises. But one was so outstanding I like to pass it on whenever I can, in the hope that it will help someone else as it helped me. As I said earlier, self-pity and resentment were my constant companions, and my inventory began to look like a 33-year diary, for I seemed to have a resentment against everybody I'd ever known. All but one responded to the treatment suggested in the steps immediately, but this one posed a problem. It was against my mother, and it was 25 years old. I had fed it, fanned it, and nurtured it as one might a delicate child, and it has become as much a part of me as my breathing. And look what it did for her. It provided me with my excuses for my lack of education, my marital failures, personal failures, inadequacy, and of course my alcoholism. And though I really thought I'd been willing to part with it, now I knew I was reluctant to let it go. One morning, however, I realized I had to get rid of it, for my reprieve was running out. And if I didn't get rid of it, I was going to get drunk. And I didn't want to get drunk anymore. In my prayers that morning, I asked God to point out to me some way to be free of this resentment. During the day, a friend of mine brought me some magazines to take to a hospital group I was interested in. And I looked through them, and a banner across the front of one featured an article by a prominent clergyman in which I caught the word resentment. He said, in effect, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really want it for them and your prayers are only words and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway. Do it every day for 2 weeks and you'll find you've come to mean it and want it for them. And you will realize that where you used to feel bitterness and resentment and hatred, you now feel compassion, understanding, and love. I went home after that conference, little apartment I was staying in, and I said, I think I'll pray for those people. In my mind, it started to race, and I started to praying for them. And I went to sleep, and the next morning I woke up, and I said, I think I'll pray for those people. And I prayed for them. All during the day, I would pray for those people. My list and prayer list got longer because I began to add other people to it. And it seemed like for the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, I don't know how long it was, I was in constant prayer for those people. And one day, I got caught in a traffic light in Tulsa, a beautiful area in our city. It was just the length of a traffic light. And I got stopped, and I looked over that house over there, and it was absolutely gorgeous that morning. One of those beautiful spring mornings we have after a long winter. Those tulips were in full bloom, red and yellow. The grass was the greenest green I'd ever seen. Little squirrels were jumping around in the trees, and the birds were singing. And I thought to myself, God, isn't it a beautiful morning? It is really beautiful this morning. And then I realized something. I've seen all that color, and I don't remember seeing in colors in a long, long, long time. And when this book talks about being cut off from the sunlight of the Spirit, I know what that means. I really do. I've been living in such resentments and squandering those hours I couldn't see anything that was pretty. I only saw things in black and white. And I don't ever want to go back into that situation again as long as I live. Now, those people didn't change, but my thoughts and my feelings toward them did change. They're great. They're really fine people. She was a fine lady, really. She had to do what she had to do. And I was drunk. That's all I can say about that. But I got over the resentments, never to have returned. Never.
If you've got a resentment that you don't want to get rid of, for God's sake, don't pray about it. Because if you do, you're going to lose it, as sure as anything. See, I think the reason this works so well is prayer for the welfare and benefit of another human being is one of the greatest expressions of love that one human being can have for another. And love and hate cannot exist on the same plane. One of them is going to have to always be predominant. And as you pray for these people on a daily basis for a period of time, you'll find that resentment disappears. And you end up resentment-free. Now just think, this file cabinet over here in my store that was filled with the damaged and unsaleable goods called resentments has now been emptied out. 90% of them disappeared because they look so stupid. The other 10% I can remove through prayer, and that means that they're all gone. And when that happens, there's another natural law that applies that says nature abhors a vacuum. There's no such thing as a vacuum or void. There's always something rushing in to fill it up. If those resentments disappear, they're going to have to be replaced with something else. God's not going to leave another hole in my head. I got enough of those already. And the only thing that can replace them will be the opposite of them. And where my mind used to be filled with resentment, that part of my mind now is filled with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, goodwill toward my fellow man. That's God's thinking. And it has replaced the resentments. And what really amazed me is I didn't have to go to any other fellowships. I didn't have to read any other books to find love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill. If God dwells within me and my book says He does, then that's always been a part of my makeup. I just never could use it before. In my chase for money, power, prestige, sex, what I thought were the good things of life, those kind of feelings had to be repressed to let me operate on the level that I wanted to operate on. But now that the resentments are gone, they automatically start coming to the surface. Absolutely blows my mind every time I see this thing take place. It is so simple, and it really does work. Now we've got to do one more little thing before we get through with resentments. It would do no good for me to get rid of resentments today if I didn't know how to keep them from coming back in the future. Because the world's full of sick people, and they're going to do it to me again tomorrow. And if I'm not careful, I'll let myself resent. I don't seem to be able to have one resentment. If I get one, the next thing you know, I got two. And then that'll double up, and I've got 4, and then I've got 8, and then I've got 16, and I'm a basket case all over again. I've got to do one more thing, and let's unfold the last 2 columns on your resentment sheet. And let's go back to page 67. And down in the middle of the page, referring to our list again. Now, see, that's why you got to have a written inventory. This is twice we've had to go back to it. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Uh-oh. We've never done this. We've always looked to see what those suckers have done to us. We've never looked at our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened?